If you'd asked me a week ago, I'd have sworn my heart was unbreakable. You can patch up the cracks, fill in the leaks, build walls higher than memory. At least that's what I believed. My name is Olivia Hart, and I've spent years convincing myself that nothing and no one could get inside, especially not the boy who once knew every hidden corner of my soul. Especially not my stepbrother, but you don't always get to choose what waits outside your door. It was a Thursday, one of those dry, static July evenings where the city hums with other people's lives. I was running late, arms heavy with groceries, and mind already whirring through tomorrow's meetings. I almost didn't see him. He was just a shadow at first, half hidden by the apartment's column, feet planted as if he belonged nowhere and everywhere all at once. A part of me froze. The rest kept walking, because old habits die hard and denial is an easy drug. I pressed the code, buzzed myself inside, and told myself I'd imagined him. But then I heard it, a low, hesitant voice, older than I remembered and sharper too. Olivia? The sound of my own name made my skin prickle. I turned. And there he was, framed by the streetlight and the late summer dusk. Ethan. If I could have melted into the concrete, I would have. Instead, I stood there, letting the seconds stretch, waiting for him to vanish, for the dream to shatter. But he didn't move. I hadn't seen him in 7 years. Not since our parents divorced and the family home splintered into silence. I was 17, angry, determined never to look back. Ethan was 18, too old to be comforted, too young to leave for good. We lost each other in the fog of other people's choices. Now, all these years later, he was waiting outside my door like some impossible memory made real. I'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. What I'd say if I ever saw him again. The clever comebacks, the righteous anger, the cold shoulder. In reality, all I could manage was, "What are you doing here?" He shrugged, gaze flickering down. I just got into town. I didn't know where else to go. I should have said something comforting, or at least something clever. Instead, I felt the old wound split open, all the hurt and longing rushing out. You shouldn't have come. He nodded, stuffing his hands in his jacket pockets, looking like he wanted to disappear into them. For a moment, I thought he might leave. And a strange, unwelcome panic fluttered in my chest. It's easy to say you don't need someone, until they're really gone. The city seemed to hold its breath as we stared at each other. Around us, strangers came and went, lost in the river of their own lives. But for those few heartbeats, it was just me, Ethan, and the door between us, one I'd locked from the inside a long time ago. He tried to smile. Can we just talk? 5 minutes? I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. He was taller, shoulders broader, eyes tired in a way I didn't remember. There was something in his posture, something almost apologetic, that broke through my defenses. 5 minutes, I told myself. 5 minutes won't hurt. I punched in my code, heard the latch click, and opened the door. He followed, moving quietly, as if afraid he'd be turned away at any moment. The elevator ride was torture. Silence pressed in on us, broken only by the faint tinny pop song coming from the speaker above. I watched our reflections in the metal wall. 2 strangers bound by a shared past, neither of us knew how to talk about. My apartment was small, cluttered with the debris of someone determined not to need anyone. Work notes, empty coffee cups, a wall of books I hadn't read since college. I set the groceries down, nerves buzzing. "Nice place," he said, as if we were casual acquaintances. As if he hadn't once built blanket forts in my bedroom, or stolen my favorite hoodie, or held my hand the night our world fell apart. I bit my lip. "Why are you really here, Ethan?" He dropped onto the edge of the couch, eyes fixed on his hands. "I lost my job last week. Dad and things aren't good. I tried to stick it out in Seattle, but..." He trailed off. The silence filled with old echoes, the late-night arguments, the slammed doors, the sense of never quite belonging anywhere. "I didn't know who else to call," he said, almost whispering. The honesty in his voice hurt more than I wanted to admit. "You could have called before showing up," I said, softer than I meant to. He nodded. "I tried. I just..." I thought you wouldn't want to see me. He wasn't wrong. But as I looked at him, I realized how lonely I'd been too. You can run from your past, but you can't outrun the shape it leaves inside you. I crossed to the window, watching the city lights flicker on, one by one. Ethan stayed silent behind me. I remembered 1,000 little things. The way he used to tap on my door when he couldn't sleep. The way he always waited until everyone else was gone to say what he really meant. Maybe I'd built my walls too high. Maybe it was time to let someone in, even if it was only for one night. You can stay, I said, finally. Just for tonight. I heard him let out a breath he'd been holding for years. Thanks, Liv. He sounded so much like the boy I used to know that it almost broke me. I turned to face him, crossing my arms, pretending not to care. Ground rules: don't touch my stuff, don't leave wet towels on the floor, and don't think this means anything. He grinned, a flash of the old Ethan, and for a second it felt almost easy. Wouldn't dream of it, but I could see the hope in his eyes. Maybe I let a little of that hope into mine too. That night, after he'd gone to bed on the couch, I lay awake listening to the quiet. For the first time in years, I wasn't alone in my apartment. For the first time, someone was waiting on the other side of my walls, someone who might just find a way in if I let him. I didn't know if I was ready. But I knew this. Sometimes the people you push away are the ones you need the most. And sometimes, the scariest thing isn't who waits outside your door, but what happens when you finally let them in. I didn't sleep much that night. Even with my bedroom door closed and a pillow pressed over my head, I was aware of Ethan's quiet presence out in the living room. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the bed sheets brought back old memories, some sweet, most jagged. The city outside was loud as ever, but inside, something had shifted. My apartment, once a fortress, felt strangely smaller. Or maybe it was just the walls inside me that were closing in. By the time dawn blurred the skyline, I was up. Nerves on edge. I found Ethan in the kitchen, standing awkwardly in his socks, staring at my ancient coffee maker as if it might bite him. "You never changed it," he said, glancing over his shoulder, voice soft. "The coffee maker. It's the same model Mom used." I shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "It works." He poured water into the reservoir with trembling hands. I wondered how long it had been since he'd felt at home anywhere. Silence pressed in as the machine sputtered to life. I busied myself with breakfast, fumbling with eggs, burning the toast. Ethan hovered behind me as if waiting for instructions. The roles were reversed now. I was the one with the stable address, the job, the routine. He was the outsider. We sat at the small table, the air thick with things unsaid. I watched him out of the corner of my eye, cataloging the changes. He'd grown into himself, rougher, around the edges. His jaw was sharper, his hair shaggier, but his eyes, those uncertain, storm-gray eyes, were the same. He toyed with his mug. "You kept a lot the same, huh?" I bristled, defensive. "It's just stuff, Ethan. It doesn't mean anything." But I knew that was a lie. Every chipped plate, every photograph on the wall was a breadcrumb trail back to the family we'd both lost. I wanted to ask him if he'd kept anything, or if he'd let it all slip through his fingers the way I sometimes wished I could. He looked around. "You really built something here, Liv. It suits you." I shrugged again, unable to look at him. "It's just temporary." A long silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. Then finally he said, "I'm sorry, for everything. For leaving, for not calling more, for not being there." His apology landed hard. I'd dreamed of hearing those words, but now that they were here, they felt almost too heavy to carry. "It wasn't your fault," I said, forcing the words out. "None of it was. We were just kids." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Sometimes I still feel like I am." I didn't know how to answer that, so I stood and started clearing the table. He got up to help, and for a few minutes, we worked in awkward silence side by side. That's when I saw the box. It was sitting by the front door, an old cardboard thing, battered and sagging, my name scrawled across it in Ethan's unmistakable handwriting. I stared, throat tightening. "I found it in Dad's attic," Ethan said quietly, following my gaze. "Figured you should have it. It's mostly your stuff. Some of mine got mixed in." I crouched down and pried open the flaps. The smell of dust and old paper hit me like a memory. Inside were photo albums, yearbooks, a faded hoodie I'd thought I'd lost, a handful of mixed CDs Ethan used to make me for long car rides. At the very bottom, folded and worn, was the map we'd drawn. Of our secret fort in the woods, our escape once upon a time. My throat felt raw. "You kept all this?" He rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed. "I guess I couldn't let go? Not of everything." I sat back on my heels, clutching the hoodie. "Why bring it now?" He hesitated, chewing his lip. "I thought maybe you'd need a reminder of who you were, of who we were." I know I did. The words cut deeper than I expected. I wanted to tell him that I didn't need reminders, that I'd moved on, but the truth was, I'd never really stopped waiting, hoping for someone to come back and fill the empty spaces. Ethan sank onto the floor beside me, knees pulled to his chest. "Do you ever wish you could go back?" he asked quietly. I didn't answer right away. The question twisted in my gut. Did I wish for the past? Sometimes, yes. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night, certain I could hear Mom's laughter echoing down the hallway or Ethan's knock at my door. But the past was gone, replaced by all the sharp, unspoken things we'd left behind. "I wish things had been different," I said finally. "But wishing doesn't change anything." He nodded, eyes distant. "No, I guess it doesn't." We sat there, surrounded by the relics of our childhood, the silence stretching between us like a tightrope. For a second, I let myself remember what it felt like to have a family, even a messy, broken one. Then Ethan's phone buzzed. He flinched, glancing at the screen before shoving it into his pocket. I caught a glimpse of Dad's name before he silenced the call. "Don't want to talk?" I asked, trying to sound casual. His jaw tightened. "Not right now. Dad and we're not talking much." I wanted to ask more, but something held me back. Old habits die hard. Ethan sighed and started flipping through a photo album. He found a picture of us as kids, grinning, mud-stained, arms thrown around each other's shoulders. I almost didn't recognize myself, so open and unguarded. "Remember this?" he asked, holding it up. I nodded. "I remember Mom yelling at us for ruining our clothes." He laughed, and the sound loosened something inside me. For the first time, it didn't feel strange to have him here. For the first time, I let myself want him to stay. The day passed in fits and starts. We unpacked the box together, sorting through memories both good and bad. There were tears, quiet ones, that we pretended not to see. There was laughter, sharp and surprising. For every item we found, a story surfaced. A birthday ruined by rain, a secret kept too long, a midnight confession whispered in the dark. Little by little, the space between us shrank. Not gone, but less sharp. I let Ethan make lunch, let him pick the music, let him tease me for my taste in mystery novels. He let me see the cracks in his bravado, the places he was still hurting. We didn't talk about the future, or what would happen when he left again. But for now, we were together. For now, that was enough. As the sun set and the city glowed gold outside my window, I realized how much I'd missed this, missed him. My heart ached with the knowledge that sometimes the people you lose are the only ones who truly understand what you've lost. That night, as Ethan curled up on the couch, I stood in my bedroom doorway, watching him. He looked younger, softer, almost like the boy I remembered. "Good night, Liv," he called, voice sleepy. "Good night, Ethan," I whispered, a promise unspoken. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. The weather forecast had promised clear skies, but by midday, the city was simmering under heavy clouds. By afternoon, thunder growled in the distance and rain battered the windows, turning my apartment into a dim, flickering world of shadows and gray. It was the kind of storm that made everything feel suspended. Time, plans, and the illusion of control. Ethan and I were trapped together, the day stretching out longer than I was ready for. I tried to lose myself in work emails, but the words blurred on the screen. I could feel him in the next room, hear the shuffling of feet, the soft clink of a mug in the kitchen. Every sound sent sparks through my nerves. I wasn't used to sharing my space, certainly not with someone who knew me better than I wanted to admit. By late afternoon, I gave up pretending. I wandered into the living room to find Ethan sprawled across the couch, one of my old novels, open on his chest, eyes closed, but definitely not sleeping. "Do you ever stop fidgeting?" I asked, unable to keep the teasing note from my voice. He grinned, not opening his eyes. "Do you ever stop working?" Touché. I flopped onto the armchair, tucking my knees to my chest. There's nothing else to do. I can't remember the last time I spent an entire day stuck inside with someone else. Ethan's eyes opened, thoughtful. "I used to hate storms. Remember? Every time it thundered, I'd hide in your room. You'd pretend you weren't scared. But I always knew." I rolled my eyes, but the memory was there, clear as the lightning splitting the sky outside. I remembered the blanket forts, the whispered secrets, the safety of someone else's heartbeat nearby. "You grew out of it," I said. He shook his head. "Not really. I just got better at pretending." We fell quiet, listening to the storm. Rain hammered the windows, drumming steady as a heartbeat. Thunder rolled through the apartment, rattling the picture frames on the wall. "Why did you wait outside?" I blurted, surprising myself. "Before you knocked yesterday. How long were you there?" Ethan hesitated, brushing a hand through his hair. "A while. I was scared you'd slam the door in my face." I wanted to deny it, to tell him I never would have, but the truth was, a part of me still wanted to. It was easier to nurse old wounds than to risk them reopening. But looking at him now, slouched and sheepish, I felt the sharp edge of regret. "You could have come in sooner," I said softly. He looked at me then, eyes raw and searching. "You could have called, Liv. You could have written, or—" I cut him off with a bitter laugh. We were both stubborn. I didn't want to need anyone, not after everything. His jaw clenched. "You think I did? Dad and I never talked about you, you know. It was like you never existed. I hated it." We stared at each other across the little gulf between couch and chair, the storm outside nothing compared to the one between us. "I missed you," he said finally, voice breaking. "I know I'm not supposed to say that, but I did. I missed you every day." My chest tightened. For years, I'd buried that ache deep, covering it with busyness, with bravado, with anything that kept me from feeling what I'd lost. Hearing him say it out loud made it real, made it impossible to ignore. "I missed you too," I whispered, staring at my knees. More than I ever let myself admit. The words hung between us, trembling and true. The air felt heavy, charged with more than just electricity. It was grief and hope, and all the years we'd spent pretending we were fine. Lightning flashed, illuminating Ethan's face. Older, sadder, but still the brother I'd chosen all those years ago. I remembered our last fight before the divorce. The way I'd screamed at him to leave. The way he'd slammed the door so hard I thought the glass would break. "I was so angry," I admitted. "When you left. At you, at Dad, at Mom, at everyone. It felt like the whole world just shattered. And I blamed you, because it was easier than blaming myself." Ethan shook his head, blinking fast. "You were 17, Liv. None of that was your fault." It felt like it was. We lapsed into silence, the only sound the rain and the ticking of the old clock above the stove. It was the first honest silence we'd shared in years, one that didn't feel like running away. Finally, Ethan broke it. "Can I ask you something? And you have to promise to be honest." I nodded, wary. "Okay. If things had been different, if Mom and Dad hadn't split, if we'd stayed in that old house, do you think we'd still be close? Or would we have drifted anyway?" It was the kind of question I'd spent sleepless nights avoiding. I wanted to give him hope, to tell him we'd have stayed inseparable, but life doesn't work that way. I took a deep breath. I think we would have drifted, but maybe not so far, I said quietly. Growing up is messy. People change. But I think I would have called you more. I would have tried harder. He nodded, accepting the answer. That's fair. We spent the rest of the storm trading stories, some funny, some painful. Ethan told me about his years in Seattle, the endless rain, the jobs that never stuck, the friends who drifted away. I told him about college, the career I'd chased, the nights I spent wondering what it would be like to have a real family again. Somewhere between confessions, the storm outside faded. The sky brightened and the city returned to its normal hum. But inside, everything felt different. Lighter somehow. Ethan stood and stretched. I'm starving. Let's order something. Pizza? Chinese? For the first time in a long while, I felt a laugh bubble up, genuine and bright. Pizza? Extra olives? You still hate them? He made a face. Disgusting. But for you, I'll pick them off. As we waited for the delivery, I noticed the old map from our childhood fort still lying on the table. Ethan picked it up, tracing the faded lines with a fingertip. We should go back there someday, he said. See if it's still standing. I smiled, the idea warming me. Maybe we will. That night, after the pizza was gone and the storm was just a memory, Ethan settled onto the couch, feet hanging off the end. I lingered in the doorway watching him. Good night, Liv, he called, voice soft. Good night, Ethan, I replied. But this time the door between us didn't feel so heavy. I didn't realize how quickly people notice change until it was right under their noses. By the time the storm had cleared and the city was washed bright and brittle again, word was already spreading in ways I hadn't expected or wanted. In the small, gossip-hungry world of my apartment building, Ethan's sudden presence had turned me from background noise into a curiosity. It started with Mrs. Hanley on the second floor. She caught us in the elevator that morning, her sharp eyes narrowing at the sight of Ethan yawning and rubbing sleep from his eyes. New roommate, Olivia? She asked, voice sticky sweet but edged with suspicion. I forced a smile. Just family visiting. Family, is it? She lingered on the word, lips twitching. I never knew you had a brother. Ethan stood tall. Beside me, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, eyes fixed on the numbers flickering above the doors. I wanted to reach out, to shield him from the attention, but all I could do was stand and let the moment pass, heart pounding. We spent most of the day apart. Me at work, Ethan out hunting for job leads that were thinner than ever. Still, the apartment felt different. Livelier, but also vulnerable, like a secret half-revealed. I caught myself worrying what people thought, whether anyone would question why Ethan always came back to my place, why we sat together in the laundry room sharing stories and jokes. That evening, as I keyed in the door, I found Ethan perched on the windowsill, his phone pressed to his ear, voice low and tense. He didn't see me at first. The sun was going down, painting long shadows across the hardwood floor, and for a moment he looked exactly like the boy I used to know. Distant, worried, holding the world at arm's length. When he finally hung up, he turned to me with a half-hearted smile. Hey, who was that? He shrugged but didn't meet my eyes. Dad, he wanted to know if I was coming back soon. A wave of anger flared inside me. I remembered the years of silence, the unanswered calls, the way Ethan had been left to drift without an anchor. I opened my mouth to speak, but he cut me off. It's complicated, Liv. He's got his own life. I'm not really part of it anymore. I wanted to argue, but the exhaustion in his voice stopped me. I set my bag down, biting back a dozen questions. We spent the next hour in a strained, restless quiet. I tried to focus on my work, but my mind kept circling back to Ethan's face, the worry lines deepening around his mouth. He watched the evening news without really seeing it, feet tapping, fingers drumming out a silent rhythm. As darkness fell, the lights from the street cast moving patterns across the walls, long, shapeless shadows that seemed to crawl up from the floor. I found myself drawn to the window, watching the world outside, every light a life unfolding, every shadow a story I couldn't see. Do you ever feel like people are watching you? Ethan asked suddenly, startling me. I glanced at him, heart pounding. What do you mean? He shrugged, picking at the hem of his sleeve. Not in a creepy way, just like people are waiting for you to mess up, or judging, even if they don't. Say it, I laughed. But it was a brittle sound. You get used to it. Around here, everyone has an opinion. Especially when you're different. Ethan looked away. Guess I forgot what that's like. A silence settled between us, heavy and unfinished. Then, a knock at the door shattered it. My heart leapt into my throat. No one ever visited without calling first. I shot Ethan a warning glance before crossing the room. When I opened the door, I found Tara, my neighbor from down the hall, standing with a casserole dish in her hands and a forced smile plastered across her face. Olivia, hi. I heard you had company. Thought you might like something homemade. Her eyes flickered past me, settling on Ethan, who stood awkwardly in the background. Thanks, Tara. That's really kind, I said, trying to block the view with my body. Tara wasn't deterred. You never mentioned a brother before. Stepbrother, Ethan supplied, voice polite but wary. Her eyebrows shot up. Oh, well, it's lovely to finally meet you. She handed me the casserole, her gaze lingering a little too long. Let me know if you two need anything. With that, she disappeared back down the hallway, her curiosity trailing behind her like perfume. I shut the door and slumped against it, sighing. Great, now the whole building will be talking. Ethan cracked a small smile. You weren't kidding about the neighborly attention. Welcome to my world, I muttered. He took the casserole from my hands, setting it on the counter. It's not so bad, you know. People notice when you let someone in. Means you matter to them, even if it's annoying. The words lingered, softening something inside me. Maybe I had been too careful, too afraid of letting anyone see the cracks. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. We ate dinner in companionable silence, the food surprisingly good. Afterward, we cleaned up together, moving around the kitchen with the easy rhythm of old routines. It felt natural, almost domestic, like we'd slipped into a life we might have lived if things had gone differently. Later, as we sat on the couch with mugs of tea, Ethan turned to me, eyes serious. Do you regret letting me stay? The question caught me off guard. Why would you think that? He hesitated, staring into his cup. I know I've made things complicated for you. I can see it, the way people look at us, the way you tense, up when they ask questions. I don't want to make your life harder, Liv. I shook my head, fighting the lump in my throat. You're not. It's just, I got used to being alone, used to not answering to anyone. But that's not really living, is it? He looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. No, it's not. The shadows on the wall seemed to recede, replaced by something warmer, brighter. I realized then how much I'd missed having someone on my side, someone who saw me, flaws, and all, and stayed anyway. Ethan leaned back, stretching his arms over his head. I'm going to try for that job at the bookstore tomorrow. They probably won't hire me, but you don't know that, I interrupted. You're smart, you're good with people, just be yourself. That's enough. He smiled, grateful. Thanks, Liv, for everything. As the night wore on, I found myself hoping he'd stay longer, not just for a few days, but as long as he needed. The fear of what people might say faded, replaced by something stronger. The certainty that I was better, braver, with Ethan around. Before heading to bed, I paused in the hallway, looking back at him curled on the couch, blanket tucked under his chin. Good night, Ethan. He grinned, sleepy and content. Good night, Olivia. I turned out the lights, leaving the door to my room just a little ajar. Outside, the city buzzed with other people's lives, but inside, the shadows on the wall felt less like ghosts, and more like home. I always thought the world changed in big, sweeping moments. A lightning bolt, a dramatic goodbye, a declaration that rearranges everything. But sometimes change creeps in quietly, reshaping you from the inside out, until one morning you realize you're no longer the person you were before. That's how it was with Ethan. I let him in for one night, and somehow he never really left. Not from my apartment, not from the space inside me that I'd tried so hard to keep empty. It had been a week since Ethan showed up at my door. The days blurred together, measured by small rituals. Shared breakfasts, late-night talks, hopeful glances at job postings. Our routine settled around us, comforting and fragile. Still, I felt the tension humming beneath the surface. A question we were both too afraid to ask. How long would this last? The morning started like any other. I was making coffee when Ethan walked in, hair rumpled, wearing the faded hoodie he'd found in the old box. He grinned at me, and for a second, I could almost believe we were just ordinary siblings, sharing an ordinary life. "Big interview today," he announced, bouncing nervously on his heels. "Wish me luck?" I smiled, pouring 2 mugs. "You don't need luck. You just need to be yourself." He laughed, but I could see the worry in his eyes. Easier said than done. As he left, I stood by the window, watching him disappear into the morning crowd. For a moment, the apartment felt impossibly quiet, the air thick with things unsaid. I realized I was holding my breath, waiting for something I couldn't name. The hours crawled by. I tried to work, but couldn't focus. My phone stayed stubbornly, silent, every buzz a spike of adrenaline, every silence a dull ache. I told myself I was being silly, that Ethan was a grown man, that he didn't need me hovering. But the fear wouldn't go away. The fear that he'd come back with disappointment in his eyes, that he'd decide he was better off somewhere else. When he finally returned, the sky was painted gold with sunset. He came through the door quietly, dropping his bag by the couch. I looked up, heart hammering. "Well?" He broke into a grin. "I got the job. They want me to start next week." Relief flooded me so suddenly my knees went weak. I crossed the room and hugged him, brief, awkward, but real. "That's amazing, Ethan. I'm so proud of you." He hugged me back tighter than I expected. When we pulled apart, there was something different in his eyes, a steadiness I hadn't seen before. We celebrated with takeout, sitting on the floor like kids, passing the carton of noodles back and forth. The tension eased, replaced by a quiet joy, the sense that we were building something solid, even if it wasn't perfect. But as the evening wore on, reality crept back in. I could feel it in the way Ethan stared at his hands, in the way his laughter faded too quickly. Finally, he spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "I need to talk to you, Liv. About what's next." I set down my food, bracing myself. "Okay," he took a deep breath. "The job's on the other side of town. It's a long commute. The manager offered to help me find a place closer, a room above the store. It's small, but I think I should take it." I felt the words land inside me, cold and sharp. I knew this moment would come. I knew he couldn't stay here forever. Still, it hurt more than I expected. "Oh," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That makes sense." Ethan searched my face, guilt flickering across his features. "I don't want you to think I'm running away again. I need to try. I need to see if I can do this on my own." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "You should. You deserve it, Ethan." He reached for my hand, squeezing gently. "You've given me more than you know, Liv. I wouldn't have made it without you." I squeezed back, unable to speak. That night, neither of us slept much. I lay awake, listening to the sounds of the city, to Ethan's slow, even breathing in the next room. My mind spun with memories of the girl I'd been before everything broke, of the boy who waited outside until I let him in. I thought about all the ways we'd hurt each other, all the ways we'd held on anyway. Morning came too soon. We packed his things in silence, both of us moving slowly, drawing out the moment. The apartment looked emptier with every box that left, every hoodie folded, every old photograph tucked away. Finally, there was nothing left but the map from our childhood fort, the faded lines and scribbled landmarks, a reminder of the adventures we'd shared, the promises we'd made. Ethan picked it up, smoothing the creases with careful fingers. "You should keep this," he said, pressing it into my hands. I shook my head, voice trembling. It's yours too. He smiled, sad and sweet. Maybe it's both of ours. The cab arrived, headlights slicing through the morning mist. Ethan slung his bag over his shoulder and turned to me, eyes shining. I'm not going to disappear this time, Liv, I promise. No more doors between us. I blinked hard, fighting tears. You better not, or I'll come find you. He laughed, a sound full of hope and old love. He pulled me into one last hug, holding on tight. Thank you for letting me in, he whispered. For everything. Thank you for waiting, I replied, for coming back. I watched him go, the elevator doors closing with a soft sigh. The apartment was silent again, the walls echoing with all that had been said and left unsaid. For a moment, I let myself grieve the emptiness, the end of something I hadn't realized I needed. But as the hours passed, something inside me shifted. The space Ethan left behind didn't feel like a wound, but like a door cracked open. A place for something new to begin. That evening, as I sat by the window, the old map in my lap, I felt the first spark of excitement in a long time. I didn't know what would come next. Didn't know if I was ready to let someone else in. But I knew now that I could. That the person I'd become was braver, softer, and stronger than I'd believed. Sometimes what matters isn't who waits outside, or even who you let in. It's the way their presence rearranges you, the way they fill the spaces you were too scared to acknowledge. It's the courage to open the door, and the strength to keep it open, even after they've gone. When Ethan called that night, his voice full of new beginnings and tentative plans, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't empty, and I wasn't alone. He had waited outside. Then he came inside me, not into my body, but into the deepest parts of my heart, the parts I'd kept locked for too long. And because of that, I was changed. That, I realized, was what it meant to be family. Not perfect. Not always together. But always, somehow, finding your way back inside. End.